Richard and Linda Eyre.
Linda, honestly, I think we've got to get into discipline. I think most of these parents came to hear how to discipline their kids.
No. We've got to talk about how to have fun, how to get them involved in family traditions, how to teach their children to have an identity.
Linda, that's just pie in the sky. They want to know about laws, and I mean, kids are out of control. They're climbing the walls. These parents need discipline.
Hey, I think these mics are live.
You're kidding.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, my goodness.
I think we're on.
We're supposed to be on right now? Oh, gracious.
Oh, hi.
Just kidding. We know exactly what we want to talk about to you folks.
We just wanted you to know that we always argue, always. So just to make you feel better.
That's how we get up for things. We have a little argument, and then we're psyched up and ready to go, don't you know? And by the way, what a great conference. I tell you, the First Lady and the Governor kicking this off, having this great idea. Let's just hear it for Gary and Jeanette. Isn't that awesome? They're just fantastic. And Steve James knows how to put on a production, too, I might add. So we're glad that Steve's done this for us. Now, we want to talk to you in 30 minutes about 5 principles that we think work for every family in the entire world, right? Linda, have we ever run into any parent anywhere that didn't need these 5?
Whether it's Kuala Lumpur or China or Provo, Utah, it's always the same. Parents want the same thing for their kids.
And there are 5 principles that never fade. Now, as we start thinking about them, we want to ask you this question. How experienced do you think you are as a parent? Some of you think you're pretty good. Some of you think you've had a lot of experience and you're pretty good. We've figured out that there's a one-question evaluation that'll help you know how good you are. In a minor crisis, do you grab the kid or do you grab the camera?
This is not a first child. You know, you just do get experience as time goes by. I mean, can you just see that mom going, "Oh, honey, look, she's kissing a pig, get a camera." You know, it really is so interesting.
If that was your first child, you'd have been grabbing the kid. But on your 5th one, you know, there's worse things. Everything will pass.
However, I have to start out by saying to you moms that are out there, and it's so great to see so many partnerships tonight, but mothering is hard. It's the hardest job in the world. And this little mom came up to me in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, and she said, you've got to hear what my 9-year-old just asked me. She just came to me and she said, "Mom, how hard is it to be a mom?" She said, "Oh my gosh, I just thought, how can I even explain how hard it is on a scale of 1 to 10, 12 or something?" Before I even got a chance to answer, she said, "Mom, sometimes is it so hard that you just wish you were a dad." No offense to you dads out there, but we know what that means.
Usually she gets away with that because there's usually 10 times more women in the audience as men. But look at this audience, Linda. This is pretty balanced.
Dads are great,
so we're
but you
have
moms
to stand
know.
up for us dads.
You
who
know
have
what
a
I
little
mean.
hard at times too. Now, principle number 1 though is just don't sweat the small stuff. There's enough big stuff. So if your child kisses a pig, or if he's going through a stage where he hits his sister, or if he's having a little hypochondria and thinks he can't go to school because he's got cancer of his eyebrow or something, just ignore it. That's the first principle, is don't get too involved with the little things, because in parenting, guess what? You got to pick your battles.
You know, there were times when our kids, and I know a lot of you are worried about stages that your kids are in right now. Really, there was a stage when our 18-month-old was in the toilet. I don't mean dabbling, I mean in. Leather shoes, clothes, and all.
He climbed in every day.
The toilet. And I remember waking up every morning thinking, are the bathroom doors closed? How many of them are closed? Oh my gosh, I know I'm going to find him in there. And it was inevitable. And you know, it was so interesting. This was Noah. And then like 5 years ago, I couldn't remember who it was. duh, Noah and the ark. I mean, really, how could I forget? But really, you do forget these stages. We had another little boy who could not remember to take his homework back if he did it. And if he took it back, he couldn't remember to hand it in. And now he is a school teacher. He's the one that has to get the homework in. So, the broad perspective really helps you on this.
One of the things that's become immortalized, we should have this put on a plaque in our house somewhere, honey. But remember this, crisis plus time usually equals humor. And so those things that are driving you nuts right now, let a few years go by, you'll remember them fondly, and the day that all 5 kids spilled their milk at the same meal will be kind of funny instead of like another tragedy. So number 1, don't sweat the small stuff. Now, while we're speaking about experience, I heard a parent say this the other day. After all you learn on your first one, number 2 will be much easier, right? Because of all the experience that you've had. Surely number 2 will be a little bit easier than number 1. Well, here's 3 of our boys, and I want to share something with you. They all have the same genetics. They all have the same environment. Then why are they so entirely different? The one in the middle, Talmadge, was the only one of our 9 who was a pleaser. I don't know if any of you have pleasers. It's a wonderful thing to have a son who's a pleaser, because here's how Linda would discipline him. If you watch Linda's right eyebrow, she will show you her discipline method for Talmadge. That was it. It was kind of like that. And that was almost too harsh for Talmadge.
It was.
Because Talmadge would say, "You're right, Mom. I can do better, and I will."
What a kid. I mean, really, he was out of 9 kids. He was our only easy 2-year-old. So I know it was possible. But he was amazing. Never happened again.
How do you think that discipline method would work on Eli on the left? He looked like that the first 5, 6 years of his life. And believe it or not, when he turned 6, his favorite phrase was, "You want a piece of me?" And if you tried this discipline method on Eli, you would see it as a target. He would hit it with something. And so I ask myself, they're the same genetics, the same environment. Why are they so different? Why does everything we learned on Talmadge not work on Eli? And then, by the way, Noah's the other one, and see his little angelic grin. We'd find him practicing that in the mirror, because he had discovered he could get away with murder if he had a smile on his face. That he's the one that was always in the toilet.
That's right.
And he was always smiling in the toilet.
So cute. It really is interesting, because we had, a bunch of kids, but then toward the end, 4 boys in a row, and then a little girl at the end. And those 4 boys and that little girl had the same teacher at the high school, same history teacher. I never knew anything that was going on in those classes. But that little girl, by the end, I knew everything that happened every day. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, just different personalities. Some are talkers, some are silent, some are quiet, some are outgoing. Some have really big issues, which we've had as well. Some learning disabilities, some things that are really difficult. And some of those things are so discouraging and then encouraging and going back and forth. But they're all so different.
So principle number 2, you ain't never getting 2 alike. All right? Linda doesn't think I used very good grammar there, but I just feel like you got to say it bluntly. If you have 2, you won't get 2 alike. If you have 9, you will not get 2 alike. Take it as a fact and live with it and rediscover each child. That's what makes parenting so exciting. And don't give way to the old thing that says, well, you got to treat them all the same. Well, you got to be fair. They will say that to you, right? But Mom, that's not fair. And Linda had a wonderful answer.
Life isn't fair. We asked our oldest daughter once what she hated that I said more than anything in the world.
That was it.
And that was it. I mean, really. Even though I did write a book when all the kids were home called I Didn't Plan to Be a Witch. And so she had a really lot of things to be mad about, but that was the thing she was the most mad about.
What
So
I
don't
used
know
to
if we
say to
suggest
them
that.
was, someday, Noah, you'll be a father, and I hope you don't treat all your children alike because they will all be individuals. So that's principle number 2. Now, here's the next question for you. Who is your first priority? Is it your spouse or is it your kids? I love the little cliche, the best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. The best thing if you're a mom you can do for your children is to love their father. Now, some of you are here as single moms or single dads, so you got to love yourself. You got to put yourself first in some ways, because so many parents make the mistake of being, it sounds funny, it sounds almost like an oxymoron, but you get so overly devoted to children that you leave yourself out and you leave your spouse out. You're headed for trouble, and frankly, your kids are headed for trouble.
Yeah, I have to tell you that a really fun little story. We had a family meeting once, and I remember Richard saying, you know, I love all you kids so much, but I have to tell you, I love your mom just a little bit more. And our second daughter, Shawnee's heart was
They
broken.
just burst into tears.
Oh, she was,
I didn't
no.
think you loved anyone more than me, Dad.
But she did, actually about 5 years ago, she called us and said, you know, that is the best thing you ever did for me. Because I realized really that mom was your first priority and not so much me, although I knew you loved me. So it really is important to let your children know that your spouse is your first priority.
And you know, your kids, it's funny, but especially small children, they understand that you're their dad and that she's their mom, but they don't really understand your relationship to each other unless you make it clear to them. And I learned that one day because we had one little guy, and if you remember the picture, you can probably know which one it was, who was just unmercifully disrespectful to Linda. And we tried everything. His sisters had tried, his older sister had taken it upon herself to wash his mouth out with soap every time he did that. And there were fights going on in the bathroom. The whole thing was out of hand. And I would, of course, want to play the father role, and I'd say, Eli, you may not speak to your mother that way. And it had no effect at all, and he'd just go on doing it. And then one day, and I wasn't even thinking about this, it just came out this way, and I could not believe the difference in this little 6-year-old's eyes. I came in and I heard him, and I said, Eli, you may not speak to my wife that way. And he stopped, like, oh, she's your wife? That had never occurred to him. He sort of knew that, but he'd never put it all together. And somehow kids, it's a funny thing to say, but somehow they are enormously rewarded emotionally and made to feel secure when they realize that you are each other's first priority. Boy, that means a lot to them. Even though they may complain about it, there's a security that comes from that. And so what you have to do is say it even when you don't mean it, right, Linda? Just kidding.
I do have to say that we had a little deal that we did with the kids when they were disrespectful. And it was just 3 simple words. When they said something was disrespectful to us, one of us, we would just say, let's start over. We set it up in a family meeting beforehand, and we had them practice. And so when we got to that, let's start over. It was amazing. It kind of stopped them up short. Not always. Sometimes we had to say it 4, 5 times, but finally they got it right. And so it really is a nice little tool to let them know that respect for you as a couple, as a mother and a father, is so important.
A lot of the things our kids do that drive us nuts are just bad habits. It's as simple as that, and respect is a prime example. If you were to watch some of the TV shows your kids watch or see some of the video games they play and so on, you'd see where the disrespect comes from. And it's not that they're black-hearted little devils who are scheming to become evil influences in your life. They just have a bad habit. And Linda, when I still remember when you would say, let's start over. And then usually Linda would repeat her request, but with a little more respect for the child. I mean, respect does work both ways, right? And so instead of saying, Eli, take the garbage out. Eli, would you please go and do your job and take the garbage out? And then, I'm watching and some disrespectful, and Linda was the master of saying, well, let's start over on that, Eli. And finally, Eli realized that he would be there all day. If he had to start over 10 times, he would finally say it right, and then Linda would pat him on the head, and off he'd go. So the next principle, and here's Noah and Christy. This is
this is our little toilet boy again.
The little toilet boy. But I mean, look at his gorgeous kids. So obviously he loves his kids, but they love each other most. I mean, that's the thing we just have to keep reminding ourselves of, is put your spouse first. A way to say that is the way they say it on the airplanes, right? When the mask drops down, you've got the little kid sitting there by you, and of course you want to save the little kid, but you got to put it on yourself first. You have to breathe the oxygen, and on your spouse first. And so, even though it sounds a little counterintuitive, almost a little selfish, you take care of you take care of your spouse, and the kids benefit all the way through.
Since we have a captive audience of dads and husbands here, let me just give you a little challenge.
Linda's waited for a chance to get at you
know
guys.
what's coming. It really is so important to send your wife away one day a year. I called it my day away, and it was so amazing.
One day a year doesn't sound like
it
too
doesn't
much.
sound like, but when our kids were little, our oldest was 16 when we had 9, and it was just chaotic all the time. And I said, I got to have some time. And he said, okay, all right, then you just go away for a day. And he didn't say once a year. I figured that out. Some days, I must admit, I had to go sit in the van and sit in a park for most of the day. And then I would have to go back and feed the baby or whatever.
I got a confession to make. I did it for myself. There would come a time, and I'd see, if you're a husband and your wife's chosen to stay home, think of the sacrifice she's making, being with those kids all day, every day. And every once in a while, I'd get to the point where I could just see the unraveling starting to happen. And we had a little Holiday Inn. It was just about 2 blocks from our house, and they knew me down there, and I'd call and say, have you got a room for tonight? I'm desperate. And I'd send Linda down there, and I remember the first time I said, how was it down there? And something about a pencil.
I said, it was fabulous. I put my pen down on the desk, I go to the bathroom, I come back, and it's still there. It's awesome. And
the simple pleasures of being without the kids.
It is.
But just,
go through your life. How am I doing physically? How am I doing socially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? How am I? And you husbands do this too. I don't know if you wanted whole day away, but it really is good to get away and just really inventory your life and think, what can I do to be better? Where am I? How can I do this better?
All right, now let's think about what we want to give our kids. Let's say we're taking pretty good care of each other, but we want so much to give back to our kids. We did a survey once of an audience of about 1,000 parents, and it was open-ended. We said, what would you, if you had a magic wand, if you could just wave it over your little child and just give them something, what would you give? And this open-ended thing produced hundreds of responses, but the top 5 were on the slide. I'd like to give him self-esteem. I'd like to give him self-motivation, initiative, judgment, and of course, happiness. Those were the top 5 vote getters. Now, take a little look at those 5 things for a minute and ask yourself, what's wrong with the list? Something's wrong with the list. Those are the things we want to give our children. Problem is, of course, those are 5 things that cannot be given. There are 5 things that need to be developed by a child. That's why so many of them start with self. You don't give someone self-esteem. They have to develop it and learn it and so on. And so the thing we think is an important principle that we're going to put down for number 4 out of our 5 is something pretty basic, and we're going to tell you a little about it, and then we're going to try to put a name on it. This happens to be a pegboard that some friends helped us develop way, way back when our kids were going into that stage that we felt was sort of the self-indulgent stage, sort of the entitlement stage, sort of the spoiled stage, sort of the time when they're like, but Mom, everyone has one, but Dad, I'm embarrassed to take my cell phone to school because it's 4 months old, and what will the other kids say, and on, and you get the picture.
It really, and it's become bigger and bigger as we've gone on. As you know, I mean, the electronics alone is enormous. It is really amazing what this is doing to our kids. It's the I want, gimme. And it just taught us so many things about, that kids need to earn. It's, some of you older people in the audience will remember we get our money the old-fashioned way. We earn it. And we really believe in getting kids to earn the things that they want.
Let me illustrate that just for a minute, because I was looking at you while Jeanette was speaking, and I'm trying to guess the average age, and I'm going to guess the average age in this audience is somewhere in the late 30s, early 40s, although many of you are much younger, and some of us are much older. But by show of hands, how many of you had a job when you were growing up? How many of you had a job? Almost every hand is up. What were some of those jobs? You just yell them out from it. Did anyone have a paper route? Did you mow lawns?
Babysitting.
Did you shovel snow?
Shovel snow.
I mean, lifeguard? Did you babysit? I mean, we had all kind of ways. Did you have a lemonade stand? I mean, we were entrepreneurs back then, weren't we? We did a lot of things. Now, not to embarrass anyone and not to draw a conclusion prematurely, but how many of your kids have jobs like you did outside the home? Well, a few of you. Good for you. Good for you. But isn't that amazing that you have to look around now to find a single
maybe
hand?
a fifth.
And all of us had our hands up before. Now, let's not blame ourselves too much. It's a different world now. It's much harder to have some of those jobs. I mean, there aren't paper routes, are there? I haven't seen any lately. I mean, it's a lot hard. We live a different pace. We live in a different world. There are safety issues now that there weren't then. But the point remains, our kids are nowhere near as self-sufficient as we were in terms of how their minds work. And parents are the same way. There was a recent survey. How many of you parents on this survey intend to pay all of your children's expenses at college? And it was 99%. Of course. Well, isn't that what all parents do? They pay all the expenses for their children. Wait a minute. Let's examine some of these premises. Let's examine whether kids can still earn money. Let's examine whether you can have a system in your home instead of an allowance. I don't like the word allowance. Now, some of you use it in a better way than I do. But think of the term allowance as a welfare term. I'm going to allow you to use some of my money here. It's a welfare term. I learned that one day when I was in bed on a Saturday morning, which was our allowance day, and there was this banging on the door, and it's like 7 in the morning. I'm trying to sleep, and I'm a little bleary-eyed, and I open the door, and here's 5 little kids like they were queued up at the welfare office. Give us our money. Get their money. Saturday, give their money. And I'm thinking, something is wrong with this picture. There's no connection between performance and reward. There's no sort of value for services rendered. None of that. That's just all completely escaping them. Make a long story short, we, with some other parents who we give a lot of credit to, spent the next year trying to come up with a little family economy where Eli had to clean the front hallway because that was part of our house and he was part of our family, and he kept track of it each day, and he turned it in at the end of the week along with certain other things he had to do. And Saturday, to my relief, became payday instead of allowance day. We had a big family bank, and we'd open it. The bank's open, and they'd pull their little slips out, and they'd figure out how much they got. And a wonderful form of motivation started taking place. And I learned not to give attention to the kid who'd muffed it. I didn't say, Eli, you only got 2 pegs all week. Look at your sister, Sadie. She got 20. You get $2, she gets $20. Aren't you going to get... I found that didn't work. What did work was to say, Sadie, you're awesome. You got all your pegs. Do you have a system? How do you remember? I don't remember encouraging you or reminding you. How'd you do that? And Eli's sitting over here just, I'm getting her next week. I'm going to do it. And if you have 2 or more kids, competition's not a bad thing in a family. I mean, it can go too far, but when it's about something good like doing your part, so all we're saying, and we're going to show you something at the end for a resource, but let's put it this way. Here's the principle. Give your kids more by giving them less. You need to restrain yourself, parents. Your instinct is to give them everything. It is the worst thing you could do.
And let me just say briefly, I mean, we'll give you a way to do this formally if you really want to start this in your family, but on those pegs, there was just certain things they had to do. Their morning things, get their teeth brushed, get ready to go out the door with their shoes and all that kind of stuff. One was doing their homework and they're practicing before they left, before they went to bed, and they could put their peg in. One was a part of the house, and the last was their nighttime things, laying out their clothes, getting their homework ready, all those things. It takes so much pressure off you. It gives them the responsibility.
Well, that was the rationale. Look, if you do this without your mom needing to step in and do it, then that's worth something. And the main reason you're doing it is you're a member of the family, but we can give you a little bonus, and that's better than an allowance. And then did we force them onto it? No. They could stay on the old allowance system, but it paid a lot less than the economy. Of course, there was a catch. If you're going to go on the economy, you got to buy your own stuff now. And whoa, was that a relief. Can I have this? Can I have that? No. Now the new system, yeah, sure. You can. Of course you can, Eli. Listen, you can have a Porsche if you save enough money. Let's take a look in your checkbook and see how you're doing. And suddenly everything turns around, and Eli'd look in the bank and he'd say, Dad, I don't think there's enough money in there. If we all wanted our money out, I think the bank would run dry. And I find myself explaining the Federal Reserve Bank to a 6-year-old. But that's okay, because they're thinking, and that's really what you want them to do. So that's principle number 4. Now, famous last words that some people think, and many of you in this room think it right now. You used to think it, Linda. We'll have these kids for our kids. Our house will always be full of kids.
I remember a neighbor coming into my house once, and it was a disaster. We had this system kind of, if I saw people coming, I would yell, somebody's coming, and that meant throw everything in the closet. Everything you can get your hands on, put it in the closet. And but this one neighbor, I didn't know she was there, and she just knocked on the door, and I opened it, and she came in, and it was just chaos everywhere. And she said, Linda, I just have to tell you, enjoy this precious time. I mean, there was a kid screaming at the bottom of the stairs. There was a scout uniform that had been ripped, and he couldn't find it, and all that. So I just thought, are you kidding me? This is not fun. Are you kidding me? And those words have rung in my mind so many times since then, because it does just last like that, even though it seems like forever when you get that new baby and you change diapers 6 or 7 times a day.
To illustrate the point, do not save your old photos too long or they will turn bright yellow. There we are with 4 little kids, but little time-lapse photography. If you suddenly pass 8 years, this is what you have. If you suddenly pass 5 more years, this is what you have. If you pass 5 more years, this is what you have. Now, the average child in Utah leaves home at age 18 to go to college or to go on a mission or whatever. 18 years is exactly 1/5 of the current life expectancy for you adults. Isn't that an interesting number? Your average life expectancy in this room is 84 years. The average child leaves your home in 18 years. That means, for you quick division experts, you will have that child 1/5 of your life, 20%. The other 4/5, you'll still have your business, you'll still have your church calling, you'll still have your golf game, you'll still have all the other stuff. You will not have the child. So clearly, the lesson there, and by the way, that's the scariest picture, because that looks like the first one, except the color's not faded, so it must not be us, that must be our daughter. And 1 generation, there she is with her 4 kids. And that'll happen to you faster than you can imagine. So the principle, obviously, is prioritize them while you got them, because you won't have them for long.
And we do have to tell you that, people come to us and say, oh, you must be just feeling so good about everything because the kids are all gone and now it's all over.
You don't have any problems
You don't have any
anymore.
problems anymore. Awesome. Just know that it just gets bigger and more expensive when they leave home, but also a lot of fun.
We want to give you some homework. We've only got a minute left, but if you've got a phone, take a picture of that so you'll have those web addresses, because that's your homework. We feel that parents need to link with each other. That's what First Lady Herbert said. It's not as lonely as it has to be. The first one is our main website that has this money system, and it even has how to talk to your kids about sex, if that interests you. So there's a lot of stuff on there. The second one, most of our books are free now. That shows how old we're getting. We've got the copyrights back from the publishers. We just put them on the computer. We'd rather have people just read them. And the last two are our daughters'
And actually,
blogs.
they are so fun.
They're way better than ours.
Our daughters have taken the baton and run ahead of us, and we're so thrilled. We're the cheerleaders now. So this Power of Moms, our oldest daughter, Sarah, is doing this with a whole group of fabulous moms who are really committed to being deliberate mothers, and it just has amazing stuff, podcasts, radio casts, interviews, everything you could want. And then the 71toes.com is our second daughter, who has a wonderful blog that is just changing lives, and we are so grateful that she's doing that. It's just all about motherhood, making it look fun and joyful and really hard and grueling as well.
Have a wonderful conference. Love your kids and enjoy them the rest of your lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.